Defense.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black. It's pouring rain. It's almost impossible to see. And in the middle of this storm, a car is trying to make its way home. It's approaching a steep curve. 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds later, that car is on the side of the road in a ditch and one of its passengers is dead. The question we had today was why? We know what happened at the bar. We know what happened in the parking lot. We even know what happened after the crash. We know everything. Everything except the 3 seconds that really mattered. The 3 seconds before the car went off the road. Is the prosecution right? Did Miss Dawson swerve the car because she was too drunk to drive? Or did she swerve because she saw an animal dart out in front of the road? Did she swerve because her car was hydroplaning on the wet road? As we try to reconstruct the events of Vanessa's death, those crucial 3 seconds are missing. And in their place is reasonable doubt. Now, as the defense, we had no burden of proof. We didn't have to call a single witness. We didn't have to ask a single question. Because that burden lied with the prosecution and the prosecution alone. They had to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Dawson is guilty of murder. They had to prove that Miss Dawson acted extremely recklessly, and that extreme recklessness was the cause of Vanessa Sullivan's death. I want to walk you through those 2 elements, one at a time, and demonstrate how the prosecution failed to meet their burden. Let's start with recklessness. What does that mean? It means that the prosecution has to prove that Miss Dawson's actions on September 25th were as morally blameworthy as cold-blooded murder. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a pretty high burden. And how did the prosecution attempt to meet that burden? They talked a lot about alcohol. They wanted you to believe that Miss Dawson had 1 drink too many. Ladies and gentlemen, what alcohol? What did they prove in this case? They called Taylor Hobson to the stand. Taylor Hobson told you that she had so many drinks, she felt lightheaded. She told you she drank so much, she couldn't even remember how much she drank. How can we trust Miss Hobson's account of the night if she can't even tell you how much she drank? They also called Pat Lawrence to the stand. And Pat Lawrence told you that Miss Dawson was drinking. Pat Lawrence wasn't with Miss Dawson the entire day. Pat Lawrence met Miss Dawson for the first time that night. And while Pat Lawrence was serving Miss Dawson, he was serving other customers as well. He can't tell you how much Miss Dawson drank. They also called Officer Foster. Officer Foster told you that Miss Dawson failed the field sobriety test. Think about that for a second, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Dawson was being asked to focus after just witnessing her friend die in a car crash. Miss Dawson was being asked to walk in a straight line, heel to toe, and turn around on a wet road. On a road that Miss Officer Foster himself slipped on. Miss Dawson was being asked to concentrate on a moving object while the victim's mother was screaming at her. The prosecution failed to meet their burden on the element of extreme recklessness. For that reason alone, the law requires that you find in favor of Miss Dawson. But there's a second, separate reason for why you must find in favor of Miss Dawson. The prosecution failed to meet causation. They couldn't prove to you that Ms. Dawson's actions on September 25th were the reason that Vanessa Sullivan died. That they were the cause of the accident that killed Vanessa Sullivan. What do we know about the accident? We know it occurred at night, when it was almost impossible to see. We know it took place in the rain. Really hard to see. On a wet, slippery road. We know it took place on a road that's curvy, that has no guardrails, it's narrow. A road that's known as the death zone. Ladies and gentlemen, those kinds of conditions can cause accidents to occur for even the most careful of drivers. The problem in today's case is that's all we know. Prosecution called Pat Lawrence to the stand. They called Officer Foster to the stand. And they called Taylor Hobson to the stand. None of their witnesses had a clear view of the accident. None of their witnesses could tell you exactly what happened in those 3 seconds. Not only did the prosecution not prove what happened in those 3 seconds, they didn't even try. Did they call an accident reconstruction expert today? Did they have somebody examine the skid marks and the tire tracks on the road? The only accident reconstruction expert that you heard from today was Professor Leslie Roman. And what did Professor Roman tell you? Professor Roman told you that there were no guardrails on the road. He told you that he couldn't possibly tell you what caused the accident. He couldn't tell you if the car was hydroplaning on the wet road. He couldn't tell you if an animal darted out in front of the road. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution failed to prove causation. Now, opposing counsel came up here and she wanted you to believe that this case is about the defendant, Ms. Dawson's choice. We have a question for the prosecution. What choice did Ms. Dawson have in those 3 seconds before the car went off the road? Can they tell us what choice she had in those 3 seconds? Or did she even have a choice? Now, when a young girl dies, it's natural to seek closure. It's natural to want to know what happened. It's natural to want answers. But sometimes there are no easy answers. At the beginning of this trial, we asked the prosecution, what happened in those 3 missing seconds? 3 hours later, we still don't know. Find Ms. Dawson not guilty of murder.
Thank you.